Welcome to the Complexity Theory Podcast. My name is Zach McCormick. I am a lawyer, but this is not legal advice. Today, my guest is Ephraim McCormick, my own brother. He's a bit of a Renaissance man, and he's going to be covering some pretty interesting topics today. I think you're going to enjoy it. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, happy to be here. Yeah,
So,
it's the flagship podcast episode.
Flagship podcast.
Complexity Theory.
I'm honored to have you be the first.
Thank you.
I wasn't lying, although I don't like to be nice to you, usually, as a habit. You do have a pretty interesting career, a lot of really interesting projects that you've worked on, and I kind of just wanted to see where you wanted to start. I know that you are a videographer, of course. You have Elmwood Forest Productions.
Yes.
You have a wedding videography company, and you have not limited yourself to that one particular area.
Yeah, I would say that that's correct. I've kind of led my career up until this point to get into this area, but that's definitely not the realm that I'm confining myself to. So, yeah.
But your wedding videos are phenomenal.
Thank you.
So
I try.
And I've seen them firsthand recently. And again, I don't like to be nice to you, so ordinarily I wouldn't just say that sort of a thing. You've done really good work, and it seems like you're able to sort of follow your passion both in that wedding arena, but then also you're able to follow it in other areas. So tell me about that a little bit. Tell me what your projects have included.
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of the starting point for me was I've always liked to tell stories. So when I was a teenager, actually was leading into college. When I was in college, I was a ghost tour guide in the local town called Mount Dora, and
You're admitting that in public.
I am, yes, here and now, I am indeed. And so I've actually, even before that, I had a brief stint as a storyteller for Orange County Public Schools. They contracted me to come in and, like, for lunch periods, I would come in and just tell random, fun little fairy tales and things like that I had come up with myself, and that I was
Yourself?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How old were you?
At this point, it was college, so like 18, 19, something like that. Yeah. It was a weird little thing. I didn't get that many stints, but I got like a dozen, I would say, over the course of a year or so, or a year and a half maybe. And then it kind of pittered out because I didn't pursue it too much, but I had college and other things with the company. But yeah, so I've always liked storytelling. Storytelling has been just kind of a core element of who I am as a person. And that naturally led me into filmmaking. And in order to make money in filmmaking, you need to have a money-making source that's, I suppose there's a couple of different ways you could do it. You could either go work the grind and, try and go to Hollywood or go somewhere else and work for a studio as a grunt and then make your way through that ranking system. Or you could do what I'm trying to do, which is to essentially establish your company first, build up your infrastructure, and then once you have a steady source of income coming in, then you can start working on passion projects, which I've consistently been working on passion projects on the side for my entire career, as long as I've had my company since 2009. But I have always, it's the goal of mine has been to increase the amount of passion projects or the amount of time that I can spend on passion projects as my career advances. Sorry.
So I think you're being a little modest because I know firsthand that you have done documentaries on historic buildings. I know that you have worked on projects for other people, again, documentaries. Yeah. I know that you have that creative spark with regard to, the storytelling that you describe. I know from first just having grown up with you that it's not limited to that one instance, right? You've done theater productions. You've done your own movies. I mean, you've scripted them.
Yeah.
I mean, from an early age, even before that point, you've always been attracted to this sort of thing.
That is
right?
true. Back in the day, I almost got arrested twice for making various silly little films.
How old were you?
I was
when your life of crime almost began.
I was 15 and 16. Although the actors that I had brought on to the project with me were kind of community college age, so they were 18 and 19, which was a little bit more serious for them than it was for me. But nobody got actually arrested. It was just a long long harrowing day for all of us.
But twice.
But twice. Yeah, twice. Well,
Not on the same day,
Not
though.
on the same day. It was in the same week, though, I think. Yeah. It wasn't ideal.
That was a rough week.
It was a rough week. I was making a Western film that I had written myself. It was incredibly ambitious. I was trying to make a feature-length Western film with a little camcorder that I had. And
But at 15.
yeah, well, I started to go to college, essentially. I started to go to the local community college when I was 15. And that's where I met, as you mentioned, I was in the theater program and stuff like that. I didn't major in theater, but I liked doing theater stuff because, I like to act.
Mm-hmm.
And
you do good impressions.
I do. Yeah. Well, no, not really.
Pretty good impressions. Or at least voices.
Yes.
Right?
I have occasionally, yes.
What's your favorite voice?
Let's see. My favorite voice to do. Well,
If you're too shy and it's copyrighted material, that's fine. We can skip right over it.
no, it's just I don't know. Like I like doing a British accent, or that was the one that I used to do a lot. I was a server, and then I would put on a British accent for when I was serving to get better tips, which has succeeded very well. So yeah, that's probably the best one that I did. But
It's a pretty good one.
thank you.
If I didn't know you, I'd believe that that's actually your accent.
I appreciate that too. Yeah.
So you almost get arrested. You're 15 years old. You have this drive to write, to direct, to act. So how do the cops get called?
So okay, all right. Let me start from the whole story. So I was doing a Western film, and the part of it involved two separate things. So again, this is a very ambitious project that I was doing. It was both a Western in the past and a Western in the present. So the stories were going to parallel each other because they were involving each other's ancestors. It was this long, convoluted script. I had originally gotten permission from a local private school, which was on a large property that had an abandoned chapel on it. And the chapel had a style of it that looked very old. And so we went there. It was great. We were filming for a little bit. And then we went in to the chapel, not because we broke in, but because there was a door that had been torn down. So it was just kind of, wandering into an abandoned space. And we looked around. It was really neat. And then we found all of these little plastic play money gold coins. And the Western did involve treasure. So we were like, oh, this is neat. Well, we use these as props or whatever. So we had them. And then we went around to the back and we saw that there was another door torn down in the back side of it that kind of led into this little basement area. And we were just wandering around, and
This sounds like an awesome set.
yeah, it was really cool.
an
set.
awesome
It was very cool. Yeah,
scene.
Yeah, it was very fun and adventurous. Anyway, so we come out of the backside. We come up the side of the road, and we see there's a patrol car that rolls around the front. And I'm just kind of quietly like, okay, this is an issue. Undoubtedly somebody has called the police, and we don't. I know that we're not doing anything bad. They don't, clearly. So we walk up to him. He's calm. He's just saying got a call. Wondering what you guys are doing here, who you are. And I tell him, who I am and who we are and what we're doing. He's like, and I said, we do have permission to be here. And he was like, oh, you have permission. Okay, good. Where's your written permission? And I was like, we don't have written permission. But the owner did say, if anyone asks, just tell them that you have permission, and also presumably you can contact them. And so he does attempt to call the owner. The owner does not respond. So then backup arrives, and they do end up putting us in handcuffs because they say, they do get a hold of somebody. No, so they put us in handcuffs first. They put me in one of the cars, the others in the other car, just kind of sit us there and let us cook for a bit. And then they get us back out, and they have somebody on the phone, and it's the owner, right? And they say, they put her on speakerphone, and she says, I don't know who they are.
Oh, boy.
I've never heard of them before.
Is this the same person you talked to?
It was, and I could hear that it was. And I tried even calling out and saying hey, this is this is me. Like, I talk to you on the phone, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, I don't know who that is. So then that seems like it's more condemning evidence that we are in fact trespassing.
This is going very badly now.
It does, yeah. And then, I'm even just kind of trying to shout, like, we have cameras, we have props. Like, why would we be vandalizing or whatever? Like,
documenting your crimes.
Exactly. And they get us back in the cars. Surprisingly enough, they don't drive away to the police station. They just let us cook for a little bit longer, and then they get us back out. And then finally, I hear him talking to another person who is the husband of and the co-owner of the school. And he's like, "Yes, I know who you are.
Gotcha.
My wife did tell me about them. She is very distracted right now because she's at her father's funeral.
Oh, geez.
So you guys were calling her in the middle of that." And I'm just like, okay, wonderful. So like for the 2.5 hour long period, we were just really stressed out. And the cops, they were like, well, we got to do something, which I don't think is true. But the co-owner was like, just, I don't know, trespass them, give them a little warning or whatever. So now I have that warning as like a little memento of that. But then the
kind
following,
of a hardened criminal.
Yeah. Then the following week, we go to another place, and this is way more my fault. We go to another place, which was
right?
It was a state park, and I know for a fact that like nobody goes to this state park. Like there's just nothing there, right? Okay. And this time we're filming the modern scenes, which yes do involve airsoft guns, which are they look very real. Mm-hmm. Of course, I've taped the little orange tips to make them look black. And we go off into the woods and we film this. So it's way the hell away from every road in this state park. But then we're coming back, and the only state trooper in like a 30-mile radius drives by at that exact moment. Not only when we're like putting up all of our stuff, but at the exact moment when we are like putting away the guns. Mm-hmm. So he screeches to a halt and he comes back. He tells us to put the guns down, and we're like, yes.
Yeah,
we definitely do. We definitely will. Yeah. He then handcuffs us and puts us on the
second time
handcuffs
in a week.
Yes, second time handcuffing.
Wow.
And then sits us down. He is a lot more understanding because he's like, they're airsoft guns. They're filming. But it's like, did you have permission? And I was like, no. We were just kind of guerrilla shooting it at the state park. So, but at this time, like I said, I'm 16, I think, at this point, and they call. He calls, our parents. And, they come and get me, and actually, he does let us go. He's like, just, don't be stupid. And I was like, fair. I don't finish making that film. I don't stop wanting to be a filmmaker, but I definitely learn a lot of hard lessons for that. So
and it kind of seems like concentrated into one, but then what? I mean, not only do you proceed forward, right? You went to school for what is it? Filmmaking, radio, and TV.
Yeah. So I went to UCF for I have 2 bachelor's degrees. One is in Middle Eastern history.
And you think you're better than us?
I do.
Is that what this is?
Yeah, very much so. One is in Middle Eastern history, and the other is in radio, TV production. There is a degree of filmmaking, so I don't want to confuse. Because I didn't choose to do the filmmaking aspect because it was less technical training and more artistic training. So it was more of an art degree, which it's fine. But I wanted more training, like hands-on training, and that's what the radio, TV program at the Nicholson School of Communication at UCF. Did for me. So yeah, I went into that, and
now look at you, because you're not just doing the filmmaking, right? You actually have something to show everybody here today, because you are not just a filmmaker. What's the term for it? Game maker?
Yes, a kingmaker. Yes, I make or break presidents. No,
is that right?
Yeah, no, I'm a game maker. I also have a company because I like tabletop games, and I have a company.
For those that don't know, it sounds sort of obvious, but please explain what that means.
Sure. Yeah, let's wrap it back. Tabletop games are games that are kind of like Clue and Monopoly and the classic things that you might think about. In fact, those are considered to be tabletop games because they are played on a tabletop.
Okay.
But there has been kind of a renaissance of the tabletop gaming world in the past 5 or 6 years. That's just tons of new games have exploded onto the scene and in stores. If you go into Target, for instance, you don't just see Clue and Monopoly and Cards Against Humanity, which is really great, but you also see like Catan, for instance. Settlers of Catan is one of the ones that kind of kicked off that renaissance.
Nerd.
Yes,
Nerd.
yes. It's very much a nerdy thing, but obviously people are embracing the nerd nowadays.
But that's it, isn't it? Because I've made pretty ruthless fun of you for this, but it seems like the market has spoken, because you're completely correct. You can walk into Target, and what once might have been maybe half of a section with the usual games you just named was there, but now I think it's 2 whole shelves on an entire row.
Yeah.
But even despite that plethora, you have found your own niche.
Yeah.
So what's your niche? We now know that the tabletop game, even in a world where you could have video games, it seems like kind of going back to almost the analog has been popular. So what did you see? What's the name of your game?
Oh, the name of my game is Fish and Ships. I actually have it.
Bring it on.
In fact, I'm gonna. Fish and Ships.
Fish and Ships. Get it?
Haha. But yeah, Fish and Ships.
Subtlety.
Yeah.
Is sort of the name of the game here, huh?
It's kind of ironic, actually, because Fish and Ships will not be distributed to the UK. Yeah, it's very, very, very expensive to get into the EU and the UK market. So for this one, I will not be sending it to them. But eventually, hopefully, I will. But yeah, no, so I started a games company called Goodfellow Games Co. And my flagship game is this. I haven't published it yet. It's actually coming to Kickstarter soon. But you were talking about like a niche of what my niche is. This specific area is just kind of like entry-level games. I wanted to create a game that was accessible to the average person who's just played Clue or Monopoly and doesn't really have the time, the effort, or the interest to get into a really intense, deeply structured tabletop board game. There's tons out there that can last for hours, and they're still super fun, but they're very complicated. And if you were to tell, like my wife, for instance, if I were to be like, hey, let's play this massive big box game that takes 6 hours, her eyes would glaze over and she'd be like, absolutely not. That sounds awful. But this game, I wanted to be accessible to people like her, people like you, who aren't in that world, who still want to have a fun, unique, and just interesting game to play, and that it only lasts for like 15 minutes.
So this is a card game.
It is a card game. Yeah.
So do you think that, like you mentioned, Cards Against Humanity? Do you love them or hate them?
I love Cards Against Humanity. I love the idea of Cards Against Humanity, and I love the business model of Cards Against Humanity.
That there's more to come, that it doesn't just stop with the first box, that you have expansion packs and things like that, or something else.
Not just, I was gonna say, it's not just that. So Cards Against Humanity really, it hit that wave at the exact right time. Because obviously, if you even go to Target, you see imitators of Cards Against Humanity.
Yep.
And Cards Against Humanity is such an accessible game. It is not just a party game. It's a party game that like everyone recognizes now, and everyone can immediately get in on. And just they can jump in. The rules are so simple. It really encourages that fun, raunchy party environment.
It's an icebreaker.
Exactly.
People that didn't
Literally
talk to each other before are now best friends afterwards.
Yes, exactly. Or figuring out what cards you're going to play kind of also define your level of humor.
Yeah, right. So, you know who you're dealing with pretty quickly with that game. Now, your game isn't that,
no,
but it's kind of springboarding off of the repopularization, right? I mean, everybody has a phone. Right, we got phones on the table right now. So instead of being head down and on your device, the idea is this forces you to start to interact. What is it that this brings? What makes it fun?
What makes it fun? Well, like I said, the accessibility makes it fun. The artwork makes it fun. The play style makes it fun as well. The fact that it's pretty fast paced. I should probably go over the basics of it. The basic premise is pretty wacky. You are attempting to collect magic fish. And the more magic fish you collect, the more magical powers you have.
But it kind of doesn't matter, right? Like
Yeah,
you had to
I
pick
know.
a thing, and this
Yeah.
was sort of whimsical, and it's
Literally,
like,
yeah.
okay, fine, we're not taking anything very seriously here.
Yeah, and the way that you collect those magic fish is you fire cannonballs at each other, and you take spoils if you win a battle, right?
Okay.
So you encounter them, you fire some cannonballs at them. If they can't defend themselves, then they kind of hold up their cards, and then you take. It's like War a little bit, like the classic playing card game of War, mixed in with a bunch of other games.
So there's an element to this too that jumped out at me, because I remember you talking about this, and the thing that really I'd never heard anything about before was what goes into making this. So you have a cool game, and in fact, I realize it's not going to be in shot very much, but just for the listeners who can't really see, we're looking at a small box that looks about the size of 2 decks of full-size playing cards, side by side, a little bit thicker, and a lot of bright colors, a lot of the kind of thing you would see basically on almost like a video game cover or something like that for like a kid's video game involving pirates and the like. And it looks great. And the cards themselves, of course, are, really, really cool looking. A lot of custom artwork there. But the thing, I guess, that was so fascinating to hear about was, how does that come about? Like, we take it for granted, right? We take for granted the box top. No one thinks about the box top.
Yeah.
But someone has to make it. Someone has to print on it. Then the cards themselves we take for granted. How many of us have seen playing cards before? You probably don't even give it a second thought. So, in summary, you learned so much about what it takes to take an idea, right? Pieces of paper that you've cut out and taped and drawn on by hand, and make it into something that's actually, it could be sitting on the shelf at Target level.
Yeah.
I mean, I realize there's probably far more than you could ever say in the time we have, but what's the summary there? Like, what does it take to go from idea to box to tabletop game?
Well, that is a really interesting question. So the best thing that I will say is that because of the aforementioned renaissance in tabletop gaming, there is also, with that renaissance, there has come the ability to create prototypes like this, because this is just a prototype right now, for relatively cheap. I paid, I think, $35 to create this prototype, plus shipping, from a company that's in Milwaukee, weirdly enough.
All the weirdos come from Wisconsin.
They do.
Right?
Yeah, you can never trust them.
Yeah.
But so
We're going to get hate mail. We're going to get hate mail.
But like before you
Polite hate mail.
Yes, but before you get even to like the prototyping level, I think the biggest thing that you would need to do is to come up with the core mechanic for your game. My core mechanic for my game is firing cannonballs at each other. And the specific way that I do battle is what I consider to be the most unique aspect of my game. And so once you have that, then you can add on a theme. It doesn't really matter. My thing could be throwing cannonballs at each other. It could be throwing tennis balls at each other. It doesn't matter what the theme is. I liked the pirate theme. I liked the pun, fish and chips. But the bottom line is you start out with a core mechanic, something that you think is really fun and unique and that you've never seen before. Once you have that, then you put on a theme. Then once you have the theme, you can tell that to an artist. And if that artist, figuring out if that artist wants to work for commission or if they want to work for a percentage of your Kickstarter, it's whatever. But you have an artist draw up some basic renderings of basic ideas that you have. Even in sketch form, you can have those printed onto a prototype and then, have that kind of prototype in your hands. There's such a big difference between what we started out with, which was literally I wrote numbers on old bicycle cards, bicycle playing cards.
Right.
I had that. That was my prototype to play test the game. And then when I finally got to the point where I had enough artwork commissioned, because I paid the artist by the card. So
that's it. Just to clarify,
Yeah.
you start with your literal homemade prototypes,
Yes.
right? You figure out you've got a fun game. So that's the first step.
Yeah. Then you play it with your friends. You play that prototype with your friends. And if they like it, or if you find some friends who do like it, then that's like the first kind of indicator that you're like, okay, I might have something here.
So I'd have to find friends first.
You would. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Which, I know it's difficult.
That's the tough one.
It's a tough one.
And then the second step, you had already kind of touched on it, was to go and find an artist, because you got to take your what's up here in your mind, you got to visualize it, and then you got to be able to get it into something that you can then do what with. So from play testing, prototyping, play testing, artist, then what?
Yeah. So you have your artist. the artist makes a few commissioned pieces, and then you can take those. Literally, you can the prototype manufacturers that exist in the United States and elsewhere. They have such easy interfaces. Some of them, I think, have apps now where you can literally just upload PNGs or JPEGs of your files.
File types.
Yeah, right. For each card or whatever you want. You describe what you want, or at the very least, you kind of go through. Like, I'll describe the prototyping company that I use. They have a bunch of templates for standard game pieces. Like if you think, okay, my game is going to require a game board that's a square 12 inches by 12 inches, they have that. They don't have custom board shapes, right? So if you're like, well, my game board is going to need to look like a spiral galaxy or whatever, okay, you can't find that on this prototyping thing, but you can create a circle board game, right? Or board a game board that has the spiral galaxy artwork on it. That's what a prototype is. So you would find those, you would apply the artwork to that, and then you would literally, it's like you add it to your cart, and then you can kind of group that all together and name it as your game prototype, and then you can buy it from yourself. You can make it public on that prototyping website so that other people can buy a prototype if they want to.
Is that cost effective? Because it sounds like
not
that's just what you said, a prototype.
Yes. Prototype.
There's no bulk benefit. The cost would be prohibitive and so forth.
Yeah, no. So you hit the nail on the head. That is not a very cost effective way. The only reason you would want to have somebody buy your prototype is if you were trying to get it to game reviewers, and
kind of like a beta test.
Exactly. And for some reason you didn't want to pay for the prototype yourself. That's the only way, right? I've paid for dozens upon dozens of prototypes from that manufacturer, and then I have had them shipped to each individual game reviewer to just give their thoughts to me and to the public about what they would do better, or even what they like about it. Some have really glowing reviews. Some have very constructive criticism notes. Some have not responded at all.
Crying in the shower in the fetal position. Right.
Like there's some where there's sometimes when I've gotten feedback where I'm just like, did you read the rule book? Because it says it on like page 1 of the rule book.
Question answered.
Yeah.
Criticism addressed.
But then I think to myself, okay, well, no. If I get enough of that specific question, that means that I have written the rule book wrong, right? That's just on me. If I get only one of those questions, that's on them. But yeah, so that's the general. Just so hopefully I've been more coherent in terms of you have writing on cards to artwork to prototype.
So yeah, we're at prototype phase in this chain.
Yes.
But it's been an adventure all the way around, and I think maybe that's putting it charitably, right? Because fine, you get your prototype, you're excited, you've got good feedback, you're ready to make the investment, but not so fast.
Yes, and I actually ran into that as well. I actually ran into that pothole, which was I got really excited to launch the game. I was going to launch it on Kickstarter, and I had 1,500 followers on my game's Instagram page at Fish and Chips Game.
Look, if you don't promote yourself, who's going to? Shameless plugs are encouraged.
Yes. And I was like, okay, I'm ready. I have enough Instagram following. I have enough, community interaction, because the board game community, like I've mentioned, because of this renaissance, the board game nerd community is just incredibly welcoming and super supportive. I've never found it's just this wonderful little pocket of people on the internet who aren't toxic and are incredibly supportive of one another. So
wow,
super cool community. And they all love board games. Like, who doesn't? That's great. But anyway, so I launched my Kickstarter last year at around this time, actually. And it did not go well. I had a goal. Oh, it went pretty well. I had a goal of, I think it was $12,000 or $15,000, and
seems pretty modest.
Yeah, it definitely was. I got to around 25% funding, and then it started to peter out, and I chose to at that point cancel the campaign when I noticed that the momentum was stalling, because there's you can let it run technically, and like what a lot of people don't know about Instagram or what a lot of people don't know about Kickstarter and crowdfunding in general is that it is only very, very, very rarely that a Kickstarter campaign will not, if it's going to be successful, that it will not get funded within the first week.
So you kind of know basically in that first initial period whether it's going all the way or not.
The only thing that you should be expecting in terms of like letting the clock run out if you have like a 20-day campaign is, let's say you get to 85% funding in the first week. And then you're like, okay, we're good. We're going to get funded. We just have to wait a few days for the random stragglers to find it on the internet, boost some ads on Instagram, and then get that extra 15% funding. That's the only thing that you should expect from a crowdfunding campaign that goes for the entire length of its duration, or that's its original set duration before getting funded. The goal should be, what I didn't realize, should be to have a ton of people already following your Kickstarter page, your pre-launch page, before you even launch. When I first launched my Kickstarter for Fish and Chips, I had 100 pre-launch followers because I got my pre-launch page up, I think it was like 2 weeks before I launched. So it didn't give anyone enough time to discover it on Kickstarter. What I didn't realize about Kickstarter and other social media platforms is that Kickstarter in itself is a social media platform. People go to Kickstarter just to wander through Kickstarter. That's what a lot of people in Kickstarter do. It's not just people who are on Instagram and they see an ad and they click it and they go to Kickstarter. There is a Kickstarter community, people who just do that. And that's something that I didn't realize going in. So now, like I said, I put my Kickstarter pre-launch page up. What a pre-launch page is, in case you're curious, is it's one page with a link. It has, maybe the graphic design of the game, and then just a single button that says notify me on launch. That's the only thing you can do on a Kickstarter pre-launch page. And it'll also show the amount of pre-launch followers that have clicked that button. What that does is something very important. Once that campaign launches, Kickstarter itself will send an email to every single person who has pressed that button that says notify me on launch. And in so doing, it will get past any spam filters because presumably if you've signed up for something, Kickstarter is a verified website. It has a verified email address that gets past spam. So that is the best way that I have found to get the word out and get, people more hyped. So whereas before last year, I started with only 100 pre-launch followers or so, I have 1,000 now.
Wow.
So
yeah, I mean, this is a project that's too good to just sort of let gather dust, right? I mean, this is fun. It's well thought out. You've got that, so it's good to hear that it's coming back.
Yeah.
But I want to go just a few more steps, if you'll indulge me, because it seems like the listeners would be interested in hearing even more about it. I know you're giving up a little of your secret sauce here, but
yeah, no, let's do it.
The idea is someone hears this and they say, oh, I was thinking about making my own game because I've got this fun thing that I've created.
Yeah.
And there really isn't that much information out there. I mean, sure, there are guides similar to what you probably already referenced about, optimizing your Kickstarter campaign, but Kickstarter is only a part of it. In fact, it's not even necessarily an essential part. Not that it's a bad thing, but for instance, if you were self-funded, right, that takes us into the next phase. So once you've got Kickstarter or funding, whichever branch of that you take, then it goes into production. And that's something you were running into. And then, of course, production goes into distribution, right? And that was its own challenge. So you were talking about what's it take to actually get this thing produced at an economic scale, right? Because no one's going to pay too much. There's a price, but no one's going to pay too much for the game. So where did you look for production?
So that is an interesting question. And so first I looked into American game manufacturers. There are a couple, but they are very expensive. The reason I looked into them actually was because I was looking to save money. Because
onshoring, basically.
Yeah, exactly. It's if I had my game manufacturer in America, in theory, if I wanted to, I could just rent a U-Haul, go up and, take all, 1,000 of the game copies in my U-Haul and then distribute them myself, in theory. And then I would save on freight, which is a big chunk of what you need to establish. I wanted to save money on freight because freight is a big chunk. I would say it's around 40% of what you should budget for when you are trying to think about the costs of manufacturing and distributing a game.
That's the kind of thing that you don't even think about, right? You got all this enthusiasm and you're like, oh, this stuff weighs a good amount.
Yes.
Multiply it by 1,000, 10,000, depending on how many units you need to distribute. And suddenly you've got stuff that you literally need a forklift to move.
Exactly. Yeah. So I started by looking at that. American game manufacturers are prohibitively expensive. Even when I factored in the savings of freight, they're just not possible. So I was like, okay, let's move on.
You hate your country. You just want to.
Why not outsource?
Right. Like get rid of the local jobs. You don't care who you hurt. Let's go overseas. Gotcha.
What's funny too, actually, by the way, I do need to say is that, I know you were joking, but what's funny is that those game manufacturers in America, they're usually not actually manufacturing in America. I mean, they have certain
designed in the USA kind of thing.
Yeah, they'll print cards, they'll print game boxes, but if it needs more complicated things like miniatures or meeples, which are little wooden carve-outs of like silhouettes essentially, instead of a fully detailed 3D miniature of a character, you would have a meeple of them, which is like a little wooden silhouette of them. Anything like that, many of them, I'm not going to say all of them, but many of them will outsource to Chinese manufacturers anyway. So I'm like, okay, well, and that's of course also why their costs are so high, because they already need to get freighting over for those parts regardless. Anyway, so I decided to go to the source. There are a few that are outside of China, but the majority are in China.
I'm surprised 3D printing hasn't really changed the game. Pun intended. Yeah.
3D printing, that's a whole tangent I'll go on. But with regards to manufacturing in China,
you found a solution. Ultimately.
I did. Yeah. There's dozens of game manufacturers in China and India and one in Indonesia, and all of them are quite cost effective.
Even with the transportation costs.
So, you said the secret sauce. I will reveal how much it would cost to create one base game of my game. And it costs around, for just the base game, no extra frills or anything like that. It costs around $3 per game.
Wow. So your prototype was more than 10 times
$35. $35 plus shipping. Yeah.
That $3 unit base price, is that with shipping or is that excluding the shipping?
Excluding shipping.
Okay.
Yeah. So just manufacturing is $3 per unit. And then of course multiply that by 1,000 units is usually the minimum amount that you can get. It does go down if you get more, like you had even alluded to earlier. If you get 2,000 units, for instance, it would probably be around $2.65, which.
So you buy in bulk, you get the discounts.
Yeah.
So you got the Chinese manufacturing source.
Yes.
Without going into too great a detail there, I can't imagine that was as easy as you're making it sound. It feels like it must have been more challenging, if by no other measure, simply the time difference. Like literally, you'd have to be up at 3 a.m. if you wanted to have any kind of real time interaction with your manufacturer, right?
That's true. Yeah. Mostly email anyway, so it wasn't that big of a deal. They did email in the middle of the night with responses to my questions. A lot of those manufacturers have English versions of their websites where you can submit your project, and then they'll send you, a little form to fill out of all the details of the project, and then they can give you an estimate based off of those project details.
How did you find them though? Was it just a Google search?
Yeah, literally just a Google search of Chinese game manufacturers or game manufacturers in general, things like that. And yeah, there's a whole list that'll come up. There are also forum posts and stuff that'll talk about them, but for the most part, it's just Google is your friend. At this point, actually, ChatGPT would probably be your friend, because they will give you a lot more detailed information about. It'll troll all of their websites and figure out information on pricing, on community rating, based off of who has had good experiences with certain companies and bad experiences with others. Because there are companies that they'll take your money, and then there's complications, and then
Right.
maybe they'll get you a game, but it's a crappy version of the game, right? And you don't want that because your backers at the end of the day are going to be upset by that. So yeah.
But you found the right one.
I found a few that are promising. Yeah. I haven't locked it in yet because I don't have the money to lock it in yet because I'm still, about to launch Kickstarter. But yes.
And you're self-funded. I mean, that's it. This is a passion project where you talked about earlier about passion projects, and it's obvious how much passion you've got for this. So you're working it. And so, I mean, it's even more impressive that you have this prototype, really, because this is just you focusing on this in your off time, and it looks so great.
Yeah. I think that part of the allure for me to even make a game is really just the fun of it. There was a game that I played, like the first non-Clue Monopoly style game that I played was called Bang the Bullet. It was I know, but it's a great game. It's an Italian Western game where
like a spaghetti Western sort of a...
Yeah, and you have you can choose from a variety of interesting, cartoony style characters that all have their own special abilities, and it's a social deduction game. It was one of the first ones that really
deduction.
Yeah, so it's one of the first social deduction games that broke into the American market. And social deduction is a situation where you have everyone at the table has a certain role. There's usually two sides that are pitted against each other, and they are all secret. So you in Bang the Bullet, you have the sheriff and the deputies versus the outlaws. And nobody knows the specific role of each other because if the sheriff reveals themselves, then the outlaws can just target the sheriff and kill him. If the sheriff dies, the sheriff and the deputy side loses.
But what's the social deduction?
Well, what
does that mean?
Meaning you have to kind of, instead of it just being like based off of the actions that you take in the game, you have to kind of talk with each other and like do little nuanced social cues to deduce whether or not a person is evil or good.
Gotcha.
And like you, of course, know your role. If you're a sheriff's deputy, you don't even know who the sheriff is. So you're like, or actually, no, you do. You do know who the sheriff is. But your goal is to take the heat off of the sheriff while at the same time not making it apparent that you are simply a deputy trying to like bluff. So it's a lot of it's a lot of bluffing.
It's a lot of strategy, it sounds like.
And people talk during the entire game. They're like, I think that you're being sus, as it were. Okay. And it's a great game. It's just such a fun little game.
You might be a little too old for that word. I feel like you're probably you've aged out of that.
No, it turns out I'm not. Yeah, because I just said it. But anyway, so
do you have a Facebook account
for Fish and Chips?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you've aged out of the use of the word sus.
I ran into that one. But yeah, that's...
So you've got your manufacturer potentially lined up. Now we're looking at the last phase of this, right? We've covered the timeline here, and what you encountered was the realization, I think, that you want to, even as an American who would be happy to sell to everyone in the union, you still saw the international to the United States markets as being attractive. And you kind of started out, I think, sort of with foreshadowing this, because you said that this, despite the reference to fish and chips, the pretty famous, fare in the UK, it's not a game that's going to be distributed there.
Correct.
Can you highlight kind of why?
Yes. And I'll start out by answering the final phase of your question, which is, because this adds context to that answer, which is after you have your manufacturer lined up, you have all your art, all that stuff, you have the money, the Kickstarter is successful, yay, happy fun times. Then you have to talk with a logistics company. Usually logistics companies are based in the U.S. Like the ones that are distributing to the U.S. are based in the U.S.
What's logistics mean in this setting?
Logistics in this setting means they're the guys who get the games from the manufacturer. Like literally, they set up arrangements with getting it trucked to the port. They get it loaded onto the shipping crate. They put it into the shipping crate. They are also the ones who arrange to have that shipping crate rented and put on a boat. They are also the ones who handle taking it off the boat when it comes to the U.S.
See, this is all the stuff no one thinks about.
Yeah,
not a soul thinks about any of those things, but virtually every product in any of our stores, including the games at the big box stores, that's exactly how they all get to our local establishments.
Yes.
And you had to walk into this world.
Yes. I had to become an expert in this, and it was very intimidating at first. There were many times when I was just like,
it's too much.
I feel like not only is this too much, I just felt like I'm getting in too deep, and I feel like I'm going to mess something up, and it's going to cost me. But what I realized eventually is that, number one, just kill the closest snake. Just take it one day at a time. Whatever the most pressing thing is on your mind, just solve that specific problem first, and then
sounds like really good advice for anybody listening to this, watching this, who's thinking about this.
Yeah.
And that sounds like really good advice.
And also, I should also tell anyone who is thinking about something like this, you don't need to become an expert. I was wrong. You do not need to become a logistics expert in order to get your game to people's doors.
I think we've got the quote for this show.
Yeah.
I was wrong.
Ha! Nice. Yes, I'm sure that'll get everyone on board.
Well, your wife at least, right?
Ha!
We can never give so much away.
Yeah. But anyway, so you don't need to be a logistics expert. That's what the logistics experts are for. Like, you just go to them. You say, "This is my warehouse. This is my factory that I have it being made from. Can you do the rest?" And they will. That's their job. They'll be like, "Yes, we can handle it. We can get it to you."
So you happen to learn it, but you realize after the fact that you didn't need to because basically they're people you pay to do this stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so it's good information, I suppose, if you're interested.
And logistics is usually the final stop. Usually, you can have a logistics company just get your game across the sea, or you can have your logistics company take it the extra mile, the final mile to the door of each individual customer.
Oh, doing the delivery.
You could.
It comes in.
Well, they arranged to have it like packed and shipped individually
from a distribution center.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And that's the thing. So to answer your question about the EU and the UK, there's a thing called VAT, or value added tax. And even though the UK broke from the EU just recently, they still have VAT, and it's not going anywhere. And when I first tried to look into shipping my game to any people in the US, or in the UK rather, or the EU, what I came up against was not only was the EU's VAT policy incredibly convoluted, it was also difficult to abide by. Because I had this idea where I was like, okay, I'll just build in VAT into my individual shipping cost for European and UK backers. Seems fine. It'll be expensive for them, but at the very least, they know the risk of not paying VAT or not having documentation that you paid VAT when you cross a border into EU country is that it will be held at customs, and then the person who's going to receive it will receive a fine.
Oh, wow.
That they will have to pay before they can receive the product, which sucks. And they will also have to go to a customs office that's holding it in order to retrieve it, which is more suckiness.
It's like the plague for sales.
Yeah.
Like there's really nothing worse than creating a legal liability for a potential customer.
So if my game is $20, which early bird for Kickstarter, you can get the base game for $20, right? For VAT, usually VAT is around 20 to 25% of the retail cost of the game.
Wow.
So they would need to pay an additional $5 for VAT, plus the cost of shipping, which is an additional $20.
So you're doubling your price, basically.
Yeah.
And so is a $20 game going to sell for $40?
Exactly. And that's ridiculous. But let's say that it does. You know, let me just kind of hypothetical this out. And I was even thinking about this, where I'm like, you know what? There's going to be some motivated board gamers in the UK and the EU who they'll pay that money.
They just say
good on them. They say yes. So I'm like, excellent. And I was thinking, let's just do a situation where they pay me up front for that VAT. I pay the VAT for them, and then they're good, right? It goes. I have some type of documentation.
You're paying the tax. They're getting the game,
right? That's not how that works. Apparently, you cannot prepay as an individual. You cannot prepay VAT going into the EU. You have to ship it bulk to a distribution center in the EU. You have to pay the VAT there at that kind of point, and that distribution company then needs to take it and send it individually, which is fine, I guess, but that's another point, that's another company that I would then need to pay money to. It's not just like I'm just paying the VAT. I also then would have to pay the logistics company that's in the EU.
Two logistics companies now?
Two logistics companies
Total.
that have their own fees, that have their
Gotcha.
own, shipping and handling stuff that they have to deal with. That's increased cost. And then I was looking at myself like, okay, well, what is the percentage of people who are in my market for this game that are in the EU and the UK? Unfortunately, it is a small percentage.
In other words, even though you love them,
Yeah.
it just comes down to basic economics.
Yeah. If I wanted to get this game into the EU or the UK, I would need to pay a minimum of $5,000 just to get the game into the EU or the UK. Then I would need to pay on top of that shipping and just shipping and the fees for the logistics company. So
A $20 game in US dollars is pushing $100.
exactly. And then, so by not doing that, by not joining into that market just yet, I am now saving $5,000 at least for no reason.
And all of that other
And all the other stuff. Yeah.
distribution costs. Wow.
Which stinks. And my goal, let me be clear. Like if you're watching and they're from the EU or the UK and you're like, well, it's not our fault, that VAT is so high. Number one, take it up with Brussels because it's their fault. And then number two, eventually I do plan on, once my company gets big enough, I do plan on being able to break into that market. Because eventually the popularity of my game and my company will be, hopefully, so large that I will be able to eat that cost and then make it up with a large enough customer base that it's justified.
Economies of scale.
Exactly. Literally. Yeah. That's the general gist of Goodfellow Games Co. and my
Well,
journey.
I mean, the thing about it is it's neat to see something creative, but it was fascinating to hear the progression through. And that's something that you don't hear a lot because you did something that few people have actually done. You took it from just being the idea. Lots of people have ideas. And you actually brought it through and you've wargamed it out basically to the point where now you know at least what the challenges are, even, regardless of what you ultimately decide to do. So that's really good. And I appreciate you telling us about it.
Of course. Happy to.
Let's make sure people can find you. So first and foremost, where can they find you for videography services?
For videography services, best place to go would be my website, www.elmwoodforest.com, ELMWOODFOREST.com.
And that's what kind of services are you offering there?
Oh, for that, it's, any type of videography services, corporate, commercial, weddings, documentaries, and filmmaking if you are motivated enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then as far as the Fish and Chips goes, where should people find you there?
Fish and Chips is at Fish and Chips Game. Fish and Chips is with an S, remember, not Fish and Chips. It's Fish and Chips.
And is it the and written out or the symbol?
Good question. It's FISH, the letter N, and then SHIPS.
Okay.
Game is usually like all the instas, but like I'll send you also stuff if you want to put that in show notes.
So fishandchipsgame.com.
Yes.
Can they find you on Instagram,
Yes.
Facebook, anywhere like there?
They can find me on Instagram at Fish and Chips Game, on Facebook at Fish and Chips Game, and then on Twitter at Real Fish and Chips. Real is spelled REEL.
Gonna say if it wasn't that, it'd been a missed opportunity.
Yeah,
so I'm
absolutely.
glad to hear that it is. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming on the show. Thanks for answering all our questions.
Of course.
Really enjoyed it. Hope to have you back sometime.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
All right. Take care.